And now, keeping up with the Hapsburgs.
Hi, and welcome back to the committee program. I am your host, Arun Chaudhary, and now, fan favorite Hawley Brett returns for Volume 7 of Keeping Up with the Hapsburgs, our extensive, exhaustive, and exhausting look at the rise and fall and rise and future of Europe's most famous family. Hawley, how are you?
I'm well. Thanks so much for having me today.
That's great. That's great. That's like at the airport when you just say random things to like the people. That didn't actually flow with what you said. So I will just say it is nice to have you here. And listen, there's a lot going on all over the world. We still consider this to be a valuable and important exercise. Can you remind us where we were?
Yes. Last time when we left off, we were getting into the 1400s, which is an incredibly exciting period of time in the history of Europe and as it pertains to the Habsburg family. It's really this time where we're setting the stage for what will become the Protestant Reformation. And I believe that if we're to understand the modern day goings on of the family, that we have to understand this crucial time period right before the schisms that divided Europe that we are now contending with today.
Okay. All right. Let's hear about it. 14th century. Let's dive in, y'all.
Great. So before the Reformation, we have to understand that there was a battle in Europe that wasn't just a war of ideas and ideology, but rather the contention of all sorts of factors working together that made what political and religious interests there were manifest. So we're not just looking at what the church was saying, what people were thinking at the time, but we also have to look at the economic situation. We have to look at how the cloth prices were fluctuating at the time and how that impacted people. We're going to have to look at the Ottoman Empire and how the threat of Ottoman invasion of Europe was truly a huge threat that the Habsburgs fought off and contended with leading up to this era and before it. We have to look at military might and naval movements. We have to look at piracy in the Mediterranean coast. There are so many factors that were in play at the time that were really setting the stage for the ultimate showdown that we'll be getting to in future segments.
Where were the pirates? Sorry, we have a viewership. I think they'll be interested in pirates.
Yes, so the pirates, there were Ottoman pirates in the Mediterranean in the 15th and 16th century, and they were responsible for looting and destroying much of the naval ships of the European empires. So piracy in the Mediterranean was a huge disruption to trade at the time, and what locations different groups were in were very important to their ability or not to be moving about in the Mediterranean and trading.
That is. How can we tie that into now the kind of power structures we see in the kind of Mediterranean versus more kind of global north? Like, are the Habsburgs some sort of guarantee of more Middle Europe against those forces?
They were. So the Habsburgs played a role of making sure that people could actually move through their empire. So they cared very much about having contiguous land, right? So they wanted to be able to move from the edges in the east of their empire, on the edges of Bohemia, the Ottoman Empire, to be able to move through to Italy, into the Alps. And so they had the whole contiguous zone, and it was very important for them to maintain the contiguous nature of the land. And so I think that what it relates to today is how borders affect our movements and affect trade. And I think that the Habsburgs really are a model to look at for how to really maintain an empire.
Yeah.
And they, of
I have
course,
one more
were...
kind of... No, one more geographical question. But their actual only outlet into the water is still, it is like Trieste, and it's the Adriatic.
That's right.
That's like that's the Hapsburg coast.
Right. That's their zone.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, of course, they were fighting at this time the Ottoman Habsburg Wars. So we kind of forget about the Ottoman Empire when we're talking about Europe. But the Ottomans were the biggest threat that they were facing at the time. And so the Habsburgs really had to hold down the fort in their homeland of Austria to keep this from happening. That was a constant threat under which they were operating under. And I think that we should give them some credit for doing it successfully. I think that if they hadn't done that successfully, would there really be a Europe? So that's the question that brings us back to today. How can we imagine Europe if the Habsburgs didn't exist and didn't fight this fight? Or what if they had failed? I think that you would see the Ottoman Empire coming into Europe, and we would have a totally different Europe today than we do.
No, yeah, and actually, we've broadcast a show from Kosovo, several other places that are in what was the Ottoman Empire, and it's a fascinating part of the world that has been erased in so many ways by the victory of Northern Europe, the global North, whatever you kind of call the kind of hegemony that we live in now, that we actually don't hear the story of a different kind of Europe, which was Ottoman Europe. We don't hear the story. But one thing that I'll close on, if you know, and if you don't, we should look it up and get back. This all has something to do with the invention of the croissant, and I'm not exactly sure when that happens, but there's something, because it's a cross, and it's like a victory, and it's the Ottoman Empire, and there's something. There's something in there.
That is right. I believe that the croissants were made actually in Austria and by Austrians as a celebration of a victory against the Ottoman Empire during one of the attacks on the city. So when they had successfully fought off the Ottoman forces, the next morning they made crescent-shaped pastries as a sort of mockery of the Ottoman symbol. And so that's how we ended up with croissants today.
That's the opposite of the story of making matzah, in which we, the Jewish people, just mock ourselves by making really bad bread very quickly.
Right.
So, this is what the difference of the continental things. But thank you, as always, for helping guide us through these historical moments and helping relate them not too closely to the present, because sometimes that makes us uncomfortable. And we talked about that backstage a little bit. Not too closely to the present, but we can still find, I think, both knowledge, solace, and inspiration.
Indeed. And I'm very excited to get to the next bit, too. We'll be moving ever closer to the present. I have here another book, another large tome, A History of the Hapsburg Empire, 1526 to 1918. And I'm super excited to start tucking into this.
That's a big one.
And finding all of the information that is so relevant to our viewers.
I'll tell you, this Reformation thing sounds like a doozy. I'm excited for this whenever this thing comes up. This sounds like a hell of a situation.
Yeah, it really was. It really was one hell of a situation. I'm very excited.
La imagen por la cual vale la pena arriesgar la vida, sacrificarse hasta la muerte.